Kiwi Ears is a fairly young company and are already one of the darlings of the in-ear monitor community for producing some absolutely high-end sounding products at very affordable prices. They have quickly risen to being one of my favorite brands, so when I found out they were coming out with their very first headphones, I was very excited to see what they come out with. The Division is available in 2 flavors, black or silver, although the silver's padding is a sort of dusty pink color. At just under €50, the Division is an over-ear, closed-back design that appears to be loosely based on similar-looking Audio-Technica, JVC, and Sony studio headphone models. In terms of aesthetics and fundamental shape, the design is not obviously doing anything new. The headband has a very decent amount of padding underneath, and at least the sliders are reinforced with metal. Unfortunately, while these do have a very nifty folding mechanism that's great for portability, it's mainly supported by a C-shaped piece of plastic to accommodate for the cable being fed from left to right over the headband. I've seen so many of these types of folding designs in the past, and they all eventually fail. Unless plastic technology has improved by orders of magnitude over the past 20 years, it's not a matter of if, but when these will fail, and anyone buying these needs to understand that these headphones need to be well cared for. I expected the earpads to be kind of horrible, just looking at them. The stitching and pinching has poor consistency, but in reality the material feels almost like silicone, and they appear to even contain something like a cheap memory foam, or at least a foam that mimics memory foam quite well. The material of both the pads and headband feels better quality than the usual consumer tier pleather, and the inside of the pads is fabric, which acts as a bass trap, amplifying lower frequencies. Inside the headphone is a moderately generic 40mm driver, which is tuned with a thin piece of fabric-covered foam. The driver itself is not the cheapest, lowest-end driver available. I've seen the very same, or very similar drivers in higher-end gaming headsets, so I'm glad to see some decent effort go into these. Inside the cups is a double cavity, which is likely responsible for some of the tuning of the headphone. The wearing comfort of the headphone is about average. I don't find myself being distracted by it while wearing them, but neither am I in love with how it feels on my head. Overall, I'm satisfied with the quality of the padding and ergonomics, but I have some serious concerns about the quality of the folding hinge. This is where things get a little messy. I don't like how this headphone sounds, as it is. Objectively, the driver is capable of producing a good amount of detail and even a very decent level of treble extension, but immediately you are assaulted by boomy, bloomy mid-bass. I was really hoping that these would either be the next Takstar Pro 82 or a side grade to the Creative Orvana Live. Alas, it is neither, but a revival of the old Monster Beats sound. Looking at the graph, there is no escaping the frankly overwhelming 12 decibel mid-bass hump. To be clear, this is a hump, not a bass shelf. If it were a shelf, one could remedy this by dropping some EQ around 120Hz, which would make a nice separation between the bass and the mid-range. Unfortunately, it's a hump, so in practice, it's much harder and usually impossible to EQ a good quality bass shelf that doesn't introduce distortion. The mids and treble response is almost good, with an overall too bright leaning tilt and a small peak around 6 kHz, so vocals sound thin and upper frequencies are harsh and a little grating, or at least they would be if the bass wasn't so overwhelming that it actually is relatively quiet to the rest of the sound. Just imagine taking a really good studio headphone, suck out the mids a little, and slap on some fat bass. There isn't a single genre of music that benefits from this tuning. It's objectively quite awful. Fortunately, there is a solution. Edifier W820BT earpads. Out of all my pads, these were the only ones that made a real improvement. Not only do these bring down the bass hump considerably, but also puts the entire mid-range and treble on a slight downwards tilt, bringing everything into relative balance. The bass is still too strong, and it rolls off even stronger than before, but if you look carefully, 20Hz is practically in line with the mid-range, and 10Hz isn't that far off either. Some other pads got quite close to this result, like aftermarket MDR Z1000 and ATH M50 pads, but they didn't sound quite right. Yaxi ST Pad 2 LR pads did the opposite and made an even stronger V-shaped sound than stock, so these are probably to be completely avoided. With the W820BT pads, they now sound like very bassy studio monitor headphones. Bass quality is still fairly mushy and a bit boomy, but at this price it can almost be forgiven, given the drastic improvements in the mid-range and treble, which are quite frankly now very decent. Comparing directly with other studio headphones like the JVC HA-MX100Z and the Sony MDR V6, the modified division is not a serious competitor, but it is really starting to stand on its own. I still wouldn't use it for anything like accurate monitoring or content creation work, but purely as an outdoors listening headphone where boosted bass is actually necessary as it compensates against the perceived lack of bass caused by loud traffic and other things, I'm starting to see a compelling argument for these existing and who might want to buy it. The reality is that it's likely younger people who are looking to buy these, those who specifically have higher treble sensitivity and more specifically a thirst for bass, and in many cases also a lower budget. However, I still can't bring myself to fully recommend this headphone. The gold standard at the €50 price point for the past 10 years has been the Creative Orvana Live, and these do not meet that standard. Even after pad rolling, these don't quite reach the quality of sound I've come to expect from Kiwi ears, albeit from IEMs costing up to 3 to 5 times as much. If these had a stronger headband hinge and better earpad tuning, things might be different for me. I may revisit these in future and try out some mods to tame the bass hump, but for now, I'll just have to put hope things improve in the future. That's it for now. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.